Chapter 1. Descent into Chaos. The storm came without warning. One moment, the prison transport plane cut steady lines through the night sky. The next, it was rattling like a tin can in the grip of giants. 12 prisoners sat cuffed in their seats, orange jumpsuits clinging to sweat-slick skin. They were men society had already buried, lifers, killers, monsters in chains. A few muttered curses at every jolt of turbulence. Others sat with cold indifference. At the front of the cabin, 2 guards held rifles across their knees. One yawned, trying to mask unease. The other kept glancing at the cockpit door, as if reassurance might come through it. The reassurance never came. The first lightning strike tore open the sky. In its flash, the prisoners' faces lit up. Scars, sneers, hollow eyes. One man, tall and gaunt, with a jagged scar across his cheek, laughed into the storm. "God's come to finish what the state couldn't." The intercom crackled, the pilot's voice broken by static. "All passengers, secure, brace." The rest drowned beneath a shriek of tearing metal. The plane dropped violently, throwing men against their restraints. A guard's head cracked against the ceiling before gravity spat him back down like a rag doll. Someone screamed, someone else laughed, the nose pitched down. The world was fire, then water, then nothing at all. Consciousness returned in pieces. The smell of salt, the cry of gulls, the rasp of waves dragging broken debris onto black sand. The prisoners lay scattered across the shoreline, coughing up seawater. The plane's carcass lay half submerged, its fuselage split like a gutted fish. Smoke curled from the wreckage, dissolving into the heavy grey sky. 2 guards were dead, broken in the wreck. The pilots had vanished beneath the waves. And the prisoners were free. The shackles had snapped, or else been lost in the violence of the crash. The scarred man dragged himself upright, blood crusted on his forehead. He squinted down the beach at the others. Some were stirring, some weren't. He counted quickly. 10? No, 12. All 12 killers had lived through the fall from heaven. The irony wasn't lost on him. One prisoner, broad-shouldered with tattooed arms, was already prying open a floating supply crate. Another knelt by the waterline, retching. A third, younger, quiet, sharp-eyed, stood apart from the rest, watching the others with a stillness that felt dangerous. The scarred man grinned, exposing broken teeth. He raised his arms toward the jungle rising beyond the sand, a wall of green shadows. "No more chains, boys," he said. His voice was hoarse, cracked, but it carried. "The island's ours." The killers looked at one another. Some smiled, some didn't. The storm had given them a second life. But the island would decide what they did with it. Chapter 2. The Island of Wolves. The jungle pressed close to the beach like a living wall, thick with vines and shadows. The air was damp and heavy, buzzing with the cries of unseen creatures. The survivors gathered near the wreck, their orange jumpsuits torn and stained with salt and blood. 12 men, killers all, some hardened, some broken, all dangerous. The scarred man, who had spoken first, took it upon himself to speak again. "Name's Darius," he said, voice gravelly. "And if we don't figure out how to eat, drink, and keep this lot from tearing each other apart, we'll all be corpses by sundown." No one asked him to lead, but no one stopped him either. A broad-shouldered brute named Ortiz shoved past him, dragging a cracked crate from the surf. He smashed it open with a piece of twisted metal. Inside were scattered rations, sealed water packs, and a few medical supplies. Not much, not nearly enough for 12 men. The others closed in quickly, like sharks smelling blood. "I get first pick," Ortiz snarled. "I opened it." "Like hell!" Another prisoner shot back, a wiry man with eyes like knives. "We share it out." The argument turned violent in seconds. Ortiz slammed the wiry man against the sand, fists flying. Someone else joined in, then another. It was a pack of wolves fighting over scraps. By the time Darius waded in, 2 men were bleeding in the surf and one lay still, his neck bent at a sick angle. The wiry man had stopped moving. His chest rose once, then not again. The quiet prisoner, the sharp-eyed one who had stayed apart, hadn't lifted a finger. He simply watched, gaze cold and calculating. When Ortiz stood panting over the body, blood dripping from his knuckles, the quiet man finally spoke. "That's one less mouth," he said evenly. The others stared. Some nodded grimly. The island had claimed its first victim, and it hadn't even needed to lift a finger. Darius barked at the rest. "Listen, you keep this up, we'll all be bones before the week's out. We ration what we've got. We find water, shelter, fire. Anyone don't like it?" He gestured at the corpse. "That's what happens." For now, the others agreed. Not because they trusted him, but because none of them wanted to be the next body in the sand. As night fell, they huddled near the wreckage. The jungle loomed black and endless beyond the fire they managed to coax from broken seat cushions and wiring. The flames crackled, throwing their shadows tall and monstrous across the sand. 12 killers had survived the crash. Now there were 11, and every man there knew it was only the beginning. Chapter 3. Predators in Chains. Morning came slow and grey. The storm had passed, leaving the air heavy and still. Seabirds circled above the wreckage, their cries sharp as knives. The 11 men rose from the sand, stiff and restless, hunger already gnawing at their bellies. Darius stood at the edge of the tree line, staring into the jungle. He looked like a man weighing the odds of walking into a lion's den. The others gathered behind him, muttering. "We're not staying out here," Darius said finally. "We'll fry by day, freeze by night, and starve by the week's end. We need fresh water, shelter." Ortiz spat into the sand. "Or maybe we just wait for a boat. Someone will come looking." The quiet one, whose name they now knew was Caleb, shook his head. His voice was soft, but it carried. "No one's coming. We were cargo, not passengers. You think they'll spend a dime hunting for 12 murderers?" Silence settled over the group. Even Ortiz didn't argue, so they pushed into the jungle. The heat was suffocating. Vines clutched at their clothes, insects whined in their ears. The canopy swallowed the sky, turning the world into a green cage. Hours passed before they found it. A stream trickling over smooth stones, its sound like salvation. The men fell to their knees, drinking until their stomachs ached. But the relief didn't last long. By nightfall, tension flared again. They sat around a crude fire near the stream, dividing scraps of ration packs. Ortiz demanded more than his share. Darius told him no. The two squared off, eyes locked, jaws clenched. "Why should you lead?" Ortiz growled. "You're just another killer like the rest of us." "Because I know how to keep us alive," Darius shot back. Ortiz lunged and the camp erupted. Men shouted, fists flew, a rock was swung like a club. Someone screamed. When the chaos ended, another body lay in the dirt, skull split, eyes staring at nothing. The killers sat in the smoke and silence, breathing hard. Nobody said a word. Nobody mourned. Caleb sat apart, as always, his face unreadable. In the firelight, his eyes gleamed with a different kind of hunger. He wasn't fighting for food or power. He was waiting, watching, planning. And Darius, standing over Ortiz with bloodied fists, knew what the others were beginning to realize too. This wasn't a group of survivors. This was a den of predators. And predators didn't share. Chapter 4. Lord of Flies with Knives. The jungle sang through the night. Not with music, but with the ceaseless shrieks and rustles of things that moved unseen. Around the fire, the killers shifted in uneasy sleep, each man curling close to his meager portion of warmth, each hand never far from a sharpened stick, a rock, a piece of twisted metal scavenged from the wreck. By dawn, the camp was divided. Darius had claimed the stream as his ground, gathering a handful of men willing to follow his orders. He rationed water, barked commands, and kept a brutal kind of order. Those who defied him felt his fists, and so far no one dared push further. Ortiz, battered but unbroken, had slipped off during the night and returned with 3 loyalists, men who cared nothing for discipline, only strength. They were already calling themselves a brotherhood, boasting of how they'd take the island by force. The others drifted between, caught between fear of Darius's control and Ortiz's savagery. And then there was Caleb. He spoke little, but when he did, men listened. Not because he was loud or violent, but because his words were measured, precise, and unsettling. He asked questions no one wanted to answer. How long until the rations are gone? How long until we start feeding on one another? He smiled when others grew silent. That morning, the first blade was made. One of Ortiz's men had fashioned it from a shard of fuselage metal, lashed to driftwood with vine. It was crude, but it gleamed in the sunlight, sharp enough to spill blood. And spill it did. When Darius confronted them at the stream, demanding they turn over the weapon, Ortiz laughed in his face. The 2 men clashed, fists and fury in the mud. But when Ortiz's man drove the blade between Darius's ribs, the fight became something darker. Darius staggered, blood running hot down his side. His men surged forward, grappling for the weapon. The jungle echoed with shouts, curses, and the wet sound of flesh tearing. When it ended, one of Ortiz's men was dead, throat opened wide. Another lay groaning with his gut spilling through his fingers. Darius still stood, barely, leaning against a tree, blood soaking his jumpsuit. He raised a hand, voice ragged but defiant. "This camp's mine. Anyone follows Ortiz, they're next." For a moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, grudgingly, heads nodded. Ortiz's eyes burned with hatred, but he said nothing. Not yet. He retreated into the trees with his remaining men, leaving the camp to Darius. That night, the survivors sat in a ring of firelight, chewing on scraps of fish caught from the stream. No one mentioned the corpses lying just beyond the glow. No one asked what would happen when the food ran out. But Caleb sat quietly, sharpening a piece of metal on the stone, his expression calm, patient. He knew what the others didn't. This wasn't survival. This was selection. And only the strongest, or the smartest, would last. Chapter 5. The Island's Secrets. The island was vast, larger than they first thought. From the beach, it had seemed like a strip of jungle and rock, but once they pressed deeper, they found it stretch for miles. Ridges of black stone, valleys shrouded in mist, and the endless murmur of waves crashing against cliffs. By now, their numbers had dropped to 9. 2 dead in the first scramble for supplies. 1 more in the fight over the blade. The bodies were left where they fell, claimed by insects and carrion birds. Nobody had the strength or the will to bury them. It was Caleb who suggested they explore further. He didn't phrase it as a command, only a quiet observation. "If there were people here before us," he said, "they left something behind. People always do." The idea dug into their minds. Civilization meant food, shelter, maybe even escape. So they pushed inland. The jungle closed around them, humid and oppressive. Their makeshift weapons glinted in shafts of sunlight breaking through the canopy. Sweat dripped into their eyes, and every snapped twig set nerves on edge. Then they found the carvings. At first, it was only strange marks etched into the bark of an ancient tree. Symbols none of them recognized, spirals and crude faces. Farther in, they discovered stone pillars half buried in moss, arranged in a circle like broken teeth. The silence around that place was suffocating. Even the birds seemed to avoid it. Darius scowled at the markings, running a calloused hand over the grooves. Some tribe, dead and gone, means nothing. But Ortiz grinned, his teeth flashing. "Maybe not dead. Maybe they're still here." A nervous ripple passed through the group. Nobody liked the way the jungle seemed to listen. That night, back at camp, one man didn't return. A lanky convict named Hughes had wandered off during the trek, muttering about finding more food. By the time they noticed, he was gone. Searches turned up nothing. No trail, no body, no sound, but the endless drone of insects. "He ran," Darius said flatly, though his tone lacked conviction. "Or something took him," Ortiz whispered with relish. The fire cracked and spat. Men shifted uneasily, clutching their crude weapons tighter. Caleb sat apart as always, staring into the flames. His voice was calm when he finally spoke. "Doesn't matter what's in the jungle. The real danger's sitting right here." His words settled over them like a shroud, because deep down, every man knew he was right. Chapter 6. Blood and Fire. The storm rolled in at dusk, thick clouds swallowing the sky until the jungle was drowned in blackness. The fire sputtered under sheets of rain, leaving the killers huddled together in the mud, teeth chattering, weapons clutched close. Lightning split the night, and for an instant the world was carved in silver. Trees bent like twisted fingers, the wreckage gleaming on the beach, faces hollow and skeletal in the flash. Then came the scream. It tore through the storm, high and ragged, cut short as if strangled. The men bolted upright, scanning the shadows. "Hughes," Ortiz muttered. His grin didn't reach his eyes. "Told you, the jungle took him." Darius barked, "Quiet!" but his voice shook. They searched the tree line with torches made from burning cloth, the light weak against the downpour. Nothing. No tracks but their own. No body. Only the dripping silence of the storm. When they returned to camp, nerves frayed and stomachs hollow. The ration packs were nearly gone. That night, a fight broke out over the last sealed pouch of dried meat. Two men grappled in the mud, snarling like animals, until one jammed a sharpened shard of metal into the other's throat. Blood mixed with rain, running black in the firelight. The killer didn't waste time. He tore open the ration, devouring it with trembling hands. The rest watched in silence. No one intervened. No one dared. By morning, the body was gone. Dragged into the jungle, or perhaps dragged by the men themselves, though no one admitted it. And the fire told its own story. Grease in the ashes, the faint stench of burning flesh. Darius tried to hold the group together, but the cracks were spreading fast. His side wound from the blade fight still wept blood, and his strength was failing. Ortiz circled like a vulture, waiting for him to stumble. Only Caleb seemed untouched by the chaos. He sat apart, calm as ever, watching the storm roll out to sea. His eyes were sharp, cold, patient. When Darius confronted him that evening, "You think you're better than the rest of us?" Caleb didn't flinch. He simply smiled. "I think I'm the only one who understands what it takes," he said softly. Darius bristled. "And what's that?" Caleb's smile widened. "To live, you have to become what the island wants." And in his gaze, steady and unblinking, Darius saw the truth. Caleb wasn't fighting the island. He was becoming it. Chapter 7. The Devil's Bargain. By the 7th day, hunger had carved hollows in their faces. The jungle gave little, a handful of sour berries, a few fish snared from the stream, never enough. The men had begun to watch one another differently now, their gazes lingering too long on shoulders, thighs, muscle. Predators looking at prey. It was Ortiz who said it first. "We've already wasted enough," he growled, standing before the fire, eyes flashing in the glow. "We starve while the dead rot in the mud. You think the birds care where their food comes from? You think the jungle cares?" Darius shot him a warning look, but his voice was weak. The wound in his side had festered, red and swollen. He could barely stand. "We don't go down that road," Ortiz sneered. "Then you die in the mud while the rest of us get strong." Some men looked away, ashamed. Others didn't. Hunger was louder than conscience. That night, one of Ortiz's followers vanished from camp. By morning, his bones lay near the stream, stripped clean, gnawed by human teeth. No one confessed. No one asked. The lines hardened. Ortiz and his loyalists grew bold, fed by desperation and something darker. They painted their faces with ash, prowled like hunters, and spoke openly of culling the weak. Darius tried to rally the others, but sickness had stolen his authority. His men muttered behind his back, eyes shifting toward Caleb. Caleb never raised his voice. He never demanded loyalty. But when he spoke, his words sank into them like hooks. Ortiz will take what he wants. Darius is finished. The only way through is to choose a side, or carve your own. It was Caleb, too, who revealed the raft. Quietly, methodically, he had been gathering wreckage, binding it with vine, shaping it into a crude vessel hidden beneath palm leaves at the far edge of the beach. When the others discovered it, a hush fell over the camp. "Enough for 2, maybe 3, Caleb said simply. "The rest stay behind." The words were a spark to dry tinder. Men erupted, shouting, shoving. Ortiz laughed, seeing his chance. "And we fight for it. Winner takes the sea." Darius staggered to his feet, face pale, voice hoarse. "No, we hold together. He never finished. Ortiz's blade slashed across his throat in one brutal stroke. The firelight danced on Darius's blood as he fell, gurgling, hands clutching his neck. Ortiz grinned at the others, his teeth red. "No more leaders, only the strong." But Caleb didn't flinch. He only stared into Ortiz's eyes, calm and steady, as though already imagining the moment when the balance would tip again. And in the silence that followed, every man there knew the truth. The raft wasn't escape. It was the prize in a war none of them could avoid. Chapter 8. Trial by Ocean. The raft lay at the edge of the surf, a skeleton of driftwood and twisted wreckage bound with vines. Crude, fragile, but enough to float. enough to carry 2 men, maybe 3, if the sea was merciful. But mercy had long since abandoned the island. At dawn, the killers gathered, 9 reduced now to 7, eyes hollow, bellies caved. The jungle stank of rot and smoke. The bones of the dead were scattered like offerings. Ortiz stood nearest the raft, blade in hand, his chest painted in streaks of ash and blood. He looked less like a man than some war god dragged out of the earth. No more hiding, no more rationing. The sea decides. He stepped onto the raft and stabbed the blade into its frame like a flag. Only the strong come aboard. The challenge was accepted without words. The others surged forward. The surf became a killing ground. Men grappled in waist-deep water, dragging one another beneath the waves. Salt stung open wounds. Blood spread in dark clouds that drew shadows from beneath. Fins cutting the surface, circling closer. One man tried to scramble aboard the raft. Ortiz split his skull with a single swing, tossing the body into the sea. The sharks were on it in seconds, thrashing white and red. Another lunged at Caleb, swinging a jagged rock. Caleb slipped aside, calm even in chaos, and drove his shard of metal clean into the man's throat. He shoved the body toward the fins, buying himself precious seconds. Screams rose and fell. The raft rocked under the weight of the living and the dead. When the frenzy broke, only 3 men remained aboard. Ortiz, bleeding but triumphant. Caleb, steady and silent. And a third convict whose name no one had bothered to remember. He was young, wild-eyed, clutching a broken spear. The raft drifted from shore, pushed by waves and violence. The island shrank behind them, swallowed by mist and distance. But there was no victory in their eyes, only exhaustion, suspicion, hunger. Ortiz grinned, blood running down his face, his blade still clutched tight. "The sea's ours now." Caleb met his gaze, his expression unreadable. He didn't speak. He only watched, waiting. Because Caleb knew the truth Ortiz couldn't see. The island hadn't released them. It had only changed the battlefield. And the sea was a harsher master than the jungle ever was. Chapter 9. Survival's Price. The raft creaked under the weight of 3 men. The sea stretched endless in every direction, grey and hungry. Waves tossed them like toys, salt stinging their eyes, and the wind whipped against open wounds. Ortiz refused to rest. He patrolled the raft, blade ready, eyes darting at the others. Hunger had sharpened him into a living weapon, every movement precise, every smile cruel. The young convict, trembling, clutched his broken spear. His hands shook. His teeth chattered. Every splash in the water made him jump. Caleb remained still, sitting cross-legged at the raft's edge. His expression was unreadable, his movements minimal. He drank from a small water flask he had hidden, rationed with care. He watched the others with a predator's patience. By the 3rd day, the young man broke first. He lunged at Ortiz, screaming, a surge of desperate energy. Ortiz sidestepped, shoved him overboard, and the sea swallowed him with a single wet scream. Ortiz grinned at Caleb. "Your turn." Caleb said nothing. The next night, a storm rose. The raft pitched violently, lightning slicing the sky. Waves crashed over them. Ortiz lost his footing. He fell, clutching at Caleb, only to be shoved under the waves. The struggle was brief, brutal. When Caleb dragged him back aboard, Ortiz was unconscious, blood flowing from a gash on his head. By the morning, Ortiz was dead. The storm had finished what the fight had begun. The sea had claimed him at last. Only Caleb remained, alone on a fragile raft, drifting, starving, haunted by everything he had done. He survived on rainwater, small fish caught in improvised traps, and whatever scraps he had hidden from the chaos. He watched the horizon for days, weeks. His reflection in the water was gaunt, hollow-eyed, almost unrecognizable. Every night he dreamed of the island, of Darius, Ortiz, and the others. Every day he reminded himself the island had tested him, the sea had tested him, and he had survived. When a cargo ship finally appeared, the world beyond the horizon felt unreal, too bright, too loud. Caleb was pulled aboard, silent, shaking, emaciated, alive. The crew marveled at the miracle survivor. They didn't ask questions, and he didn't answer, because Caleb knew survival had a price, and he had paid it in full. Chapter 10. The Last Killer. The mainland came into view like a dream. Lights glimmered across the horizon, the sounds of civilization distant but intoxicating. Caleb felt nothing. No relief, no joy, only a hollow, burning satisfaction. The authorities hailed him as a miracle survivor, a man who had endured a plane crash, a deserted island, and the horrors of hunger and violence. Journalists wanted stories, cameras flashed, people whispered about his courage. Caleb smiled politely, played the part. The scars on his arms, the hollow eyes, the quiet demeanor, all carefully measured to evoke sympathy and awe. No one knew what he truly was. On the ride into the city, Caleb thought of the island. Darius, Ortiz, the young convict, the others. Dead. Not because of the sea or hunger or the storm, but because he had let them die. Because he had survived while they did not. And the taste of it lingered, sweet and cold. Back in the city, he moved quietly, blending in. A man unremarkable on the surface, unassuming in demeanor. Yet beneath, the same predator waited. The island had tested him, shaped him, sharpened him. The world had yet to see his true nature. The first night back, Caleb slipped out of the hotel unnoticed, walking the dark streets with the same patience he had shown on the raft. He watched, he waited, he planned. Society assumed that the horrors of the island had ended with the crash. They didn't know that the last killer had returned. They didn't know that the most dangerous of all had survived. And Caleb intended to make sure they never did. The city stretched out before him, endless possibilities glinting in neon lights and shadows. The predator had returned to its natural habitat, and now nothing could stop him.